Thank you very much for coming here tonight. This is part of the Brunswick Artist Studios 40th anniversary exhibition and event. And as you may understand, the majority of people that have had studios here have been visual artists. But we've been very fortunate that probably 20 to 30% of the studios have been occupied by the writers community. And trying to meld an art show with literary work is kind of challenging. And we do have, if you have time at the end of the event tonight, you can go into the galleries and read. Some of the work is on the walls, and some of it is in books on a table in this area. It's like a literary section. But to accommodate and honor the people that have been working within the writing, we decided we'd have a reading tonight. And so that has morphed into a little bit more than just strictly that area. We'll also have 2 performances at the very conclusion. So I'm really happy you've come here. I really appreciate the great effort that people in the greater arts community in Missoula and Montana and the country have displayed by participating in this and by contributing to the culture. And Emily? Emily Ransdell was the first manager for the building. She was a lot more than that, but she happened to be here because she was getting her MFA at the university in the early 80s. Yeah. The early 80s. And she came from Oregon, to talk tonight. She's going to read here, but she has a really short description from a friend of hers who is also a poet that we would like to start off tonight with.
So I'm in correspondence with a poet named Dorian Loud. Some of you might, if you know poetry, you might know her. So I wrote her a letter and kind of hand-wringing about the role of art in the times that we're in now. And what is art, what does art matter, and what does our writing matter, and all this. And she just wrote me back this piece that is just so great that I shared it with Leslie today, and we just thought you might like to hear it tonight. So
shout it out.
I'm trying. Okay. We need art. Our culture, our country, our world needs art. Those who can make it would be shirking their duty to the past, present, and future if they didn't continue to create, even as kingdoms rise and fall. Art is what's left, finally, in the wake of history. We don't just need a record of dates and events, we need an emotional history as well. One that includes who we were, bears witness to what we felt, while everything else around us swirled into and out of our time on Earth. I'm going to read that last line again. We don't just need a record of dates and events, we need an emotional history as well. One that includes who we were, bears witness to what we felt while everything around us swirled into and out of our time on Earth. So, and then she says, so good luck. Good luck with that. Isn't that great? That's good.
I am supposed to introduce Fred, and I lost the piece of paper. You can tell I don't usually work.
Buy me a drink.
So Fred, I'm going to ask Fred to introduce himself. Is that okay? Will you come up here? Yes. And Fred, I can tell you this. Fred had a very small studio in the upstairs for several years. It's about 9.5 feet by 9.5 feet. It's really charming. And he's a large man. And I would go in and he had a very comfortable chair that he occupied. And if I opened the door, his energy filled the whole room.
I never knew that. It's kind of scary. Right.
So could you please tell them a little bit about yourself?
Well, shucks, we got some time here. So, well, I went to the program here. I've been writing fiction and nonfiction for 30 years. I've published widely in magazines. I'm not going to give you a list.
Give a
They're
last
all,
name.
They're all heavyweight. What's that?
Do you have a last name?
Oh, my name. That's not important. As soon as I get talking, you'll recognize me. I'm sure. That's a joke. I'm sorry. I'm just loosened up here because people usually know better than to hand me a free microphone.
Oh,
but here I am. I'm winging it again. I've had fellowships from the NEA. You don't want to hear all this stuff. Fellowships.
What, taking your sunglasses off?
What's that?
You mind taking your sunglasses off?
Say
Can we
what?
see your eyes?
Oh.
Thank you.
You need
Is that
to
okay?
see my eyes.
Is that
yeah,
okay?
I can appreciate that.
Thank
yeah,
you.
Yeah.
What's your next publication?
Well, I wrote a book that was pretty successful a few years back called Rebuilding the Indian. It's about restoring an Indian motorcycle from parts, and it turned out it was a memoir. I didn't even know that. It did well. It came out with Riverhead Books, and I have a book of short pieces that have been in magazines. It's called Extremophilia, and I'll be reading from that tonight. And I'm married to Carolyn Patterson, and she's a delightful writer. And we've been writing together for some 30 years. We're still at it. Pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, I'm done being goofy.
So
yeah.
the sixth one.
Yeah.
Did you write the Indian book here at the Brunswick?
No, it's before. That
No,
was before.
that's correct. Yeah.
Okay.
When I was here, I was working on short pieces as magazine stuff.
Yeah.
So that's my lineage. Let me see. I was going to read you guys in honor of short pieces, a very short piece, and I think everyone's going to appreciate that. And there we go. Yeah, I've published in a number of periodicals around the country. This is a piece called Jesus Just Got Evil. That's spelled E-V-E-L. Evel Knievel was a great American hellraiser. He grew up in a hard-nosed mining town, jumped tailings piles on a Schwinn, learned quickly that his strong suit was his guts. From 1965 to 1981, he made 300 motorcycle jumps of ever-increasing distance and audacity. Starting with a pen full of rattlesnakes for a failing Harley-Davidson dealership in Idaho, in a couple years he was stunt jumping nationwide. Cars, Mack trucks, double-decker buses, the Caesars Palace fountains, and most famously the Snake River Canyon, a jump spoiled by premature deployment of a parachute. In the course of these years, he suffered numerous concussions, broke 30 different bones, spent half his time in the hospital. He made millions of dollars, partied with the stars, flew around in a Learjet, drove his kids to the fishing hole in a yellow Ferrari V12. His style came from various 60s icons. The white-caped outfits from Elvis Presley, the motor mouth from Muhammad Ali, the rockabilly hair from Jerry Lee Lewis. But put him on a Harley-Davidson Sportster and he rode like nobody else in the world. He also crashed like nobody else. When he died of pulmonary fibrosis on November 30th, 2007, his family announced they would, quote, throw a funeral, and that the event would, quote, bear Evil's signature, which could mean just about anything if you knew Evil. The funeral would take place in his hometown of Butte, Montana, a gritty, hard-partying mountain town whose St. Patrick's Day revels drew crowds in the tens of thousands. Factor in this proclivity with Knievel's many stuntman pals and enough black leather to start a shoe factory, the Butte officials anticipated a send-off of near unprecedented fervor. But if you were looking for someone to pop a screaming block-long wheelie out of the parking lot and lead Evel Knievel to the sweet hereafter, well, you'd come to the wrong place. Monday morning, December 10th, was cold, blustery, and we got a late start driving down from Helena, but we managed to park just a block from the Civic Center. 5 minutes before the event, we strolled easily past a fleet of Phantom Gray stretch Cadillacs, an NBC satellite link, and a squad of extremely husky ushers in Snow White XXL morning suits. Moving briskly to the sign-in desk, we took a program, went inside, were able to find a seat immediately. At the south end of the hall, beneath a bank of red poinsettias, Evel Knievel lay in state. His coffin was rustic pine, and he wore his signature white racing leathers, which featured a red, white, and blue chevron down the front. To one side of the coffin sat a snow white pickup, a matching chevron across its hood. To the other side was a photo gallery of his most spectacular jumps. Above the funeral bier, a huge slide projector marched through photographs of his life, accompanied by a soundtrack of country songs. Because of this year's extended elk hunting season, there was plenty of camouflage in the crowd. Lots of Carhartt work jackets, lots of black leather, of course, and a significant number of people who walked with limps. There was a surprising number of toddlers, most of them not into it at all. The media had projected overflow crowds in the thousands, but at 11, as My Way played for a second time on the sound system, the 7,500-seat Butte Civic Center was half empty. Special guests included actor Matthew McConaughey, narrator of the History Channel's Knievel biography, ABC sports producer Doug Wilson, the Crystal Cathedral's Reverend Robert Schuler, who baptized Knievel last April, professional stuntman Gene Sullivan of the Jump for Jesus Motorcycle Club, former heavyweight champion Smokin' Joe Frazier, and former Montana Governor Judy Martz, who'd grown up with Knievel. When Martz spoke, she blamed the empty seats on the weather, explaining it was too cold for the Harley crowd to ride. The bikers also drive cars, and besides, it wasn't really that cold, and so some of us got the uneasy feeling the absentees knew something we did not. The rumors of an admission charge had proved false. On the other hand, the event soon began to resemble a bait and switch. It promised to be a tribute, but ended up more of a revival, with the Lamb of God methodically thrashing another wild Dionysian heart. Certainly the funeral delivered its moments of fancy. The first of these came when Reverend Schuler introduced Judy Martz as Montana's twice-elected governor. Martz was most emphatically a one-term governor, but she did not bother to correct him. She moved quickly past the subject of how Knievel became who he was, went on to describe his 11th hour epiphany at length, ended with the statement, "He is probably now worshiping with the saints." For some of us, the task of picturing Matthew, Mark, Luke, and Evel was too tall a order. It was easier to imagine him jumping the Berkeley Pit, a massive Superfund site up the mountain that's reported to be wider than the River Styx. Mostly, though, the inflationist oratory set the tone for the rest of the funeral, which consisted largely of triumphant accounts of his conversion. Indeed, from these accounts, in a hunting community like Butte, it wasn't far-fetched to think of Evel Knievel's soul as a kind of certified Boone and Crockett soul, the kind of trophy soul only Hunter Thompson might outscore. Evel's friend and producer, Doug Wilson, provided some relief with his assertion that Evel Knievel was, quote, actually not a very good motorcycle. Are you kidding? Motorcycle rider. Are you kidding? All those crashes? On the other hand, he was an absolutely world-class showman. Wilson went on to relate Knievel's response when a woman from the BBC asked if his failure to jump the Snake River Canyon had damaged his credibility. Knievel turned to her and replied, "No canyon or woman I jumped ever damaged my credibility." Crazy guy. The only one to bring it all home was Knievel's son, Robbie Knievel, a daring stuntman after his father's heart. Robbie embarked first on a puzzling, extremely high-risk monologue on the art of duck plucking. finally righted himself just in time and came roaring back to declaim, "I am the son of the greatest daredevil in the world." Almost before the words were out, the crowd whooped, shouted, and cheered, and for the first and only time that day, the Butte Civic Center came alive. There it was in spades, the bona fide, bare naked Knievel bravado, that thing that beleaguered audience had come to hear. Beyond argument, the grieving process is very personal, and each of us is entitled to find comfort the best we can. But the dying Knievel was so frail, and all the star-powered salvation rhetoric so relentless, that in the end, the saving of his soul seemed more like a corporate takeover than an act of grace. Along these lines, it seemed reasonable to ask, if Knievel's salvation was such a rock-solid, slam-dunk kind of a deal, then why were so many people selling it so hard? Reverend Schuler provided the closing remarks. With the best suntan in the house, he spoke at length on the integrity of evil's conversion, as if we might be harboring doubts. It was unfortunate that it took place on April Fool's Day. But Schuler is an extraordinary speaker with a voice that could soar from a gravelly whisper all the way to a cosmic thunderclap. The eyes have it! I gotta do my Reverend Schuler here. The eyes have it. The eyes do not lie. Schuler kept insisting. He certainly gave it his all. Indeed, if he'd had a tachometer hooked up, he would have revved it right out to the red line. Yet in the end, the harder he worked it, the more people stood up and filed out, satisfied apparently that there was nothing more left to see. We went directly to a bar. We ended up at the M&M, a Butte landmark that up until 2005 remodel had not closed its doors for 100 years. Couldn't believe my eyes, said the bartender, shaking his head. This was supposed to be the biggest deal ever, but the Met Bar right across the street from the Civic Center was dead. That was always Evil's favorite bar. We ordered a round of beers and some of us had whiskey. All of us, as it happened, were over 50, and in light of this fact and the gravity of the occasion, we began to talk earnestly about the aging process. In particular, we talked about the question of memory, what was memorable and what was not. Eventually, we came to grips with the fact we'd driven 70 miles to the funeral to the most outrageous guy to live in these the funeral of the most outrageous guy to ever live in these parts, and it wasn't very memorable at all. Were we within our rights to complain? Or is it simply bad form on our part? We ended up watching the big screen TV above us, which featured, of all things, live CNN coverage of Evel Knievel lying in state. Talk about your relativism, somebody said. We looked all around the mostly empty bar and sipped our beers the way you do when it looks like you'll end up partying all by yourself. Where was everyone, we wondered. Thank you very much.
Woo! Yeah, that sounds good.
Excuse me.
Okay. So, Fred, are you going to introduce Cindy?
Yeah, sorry.
So, Cindy Knudsen will be reading a poem. Is that right?
Sure.
Oh, I've got more than one.
I'm going to try and keep to the minute. Okay, good.
Are you aware that he and Pat Williams are first cousins? Did you work with them?
What's that?
Even when Pat Williams are first cousins, did you work with them?
Sometimes he denies that, sometimes he doesn't. Okay, I'm going to introduce Cindy Knudsen next. Cindy spent her first 3 years in rural eastern Montana before moving to the Missoula area, where she spends most of her time, with the exception of short moves to San Francisco, Europe, and trips to New York City to visit her daughter. Cindy paints and writes poetry while balancing her work as a nurse and a yoga teacher, spending as much time outside as possible, hiding in forests and swimming in the rivers.
Thank you.
Cindy.
Milltown Dam, number 8. I drove past my lover's house looking for his green Mustang. I told him how much I loved the sound of the train. He called the long freights the night crawlers. This made me love him more. Cindy, can you speak a little Children searched for treasure in the empty lot where the church stood before it was moved. I used a silver spoon in my 8th year, digging for night crawlers in the old riverbed. We walked to the reservoir along the tracks, the unmarked train crossing in our path, listening for the speeding passenger trains traveling south. You held our fishing poles in my hand, the sun warm on our shoulders, the smell of the river, flush with cottonwood and dogwood, buttercups everywhere. You were the best father. We baited the hooks and cast into the Clark Fork. The red and white bobbers traveled with the currents. We caught a few good trout in the bottom feeders you called suckers. We fished in the Milltown Reservoir. Through the suckers into the trees behind us, nocturnal carnivores devoured their meal each night after sunset. A few years later, you were warned by a mill worker friend the reservoir was contaminated by heavy metals. I thought of the raccoons, skunks, and birds of prey, fat and sick with toxins. 33 years after we caught our last fish, dam removal and river cleanup began. Trainloads of heavy metal and arsenic-laced mud were removed daily and hauled to a town called Opportunity. You began to lose your memory, and my son was born 2 months early. Your silence grew as you told the fishing stories again and again. My next poem is called River. Give me something to knock my dick in the dirt. Help me, nurse. He closed his eyes, racing thoughts bounced like dusty moths sideways in his head. He hadn't slept for a week and worried he would never sleep again. He gambled away all of his retirement money a few months earlier, sold his deceased wife's silver and jewelry to buy cheap booze. He checked himself into the hospital with the encouragement of the neighbor, whose daughter was treated the month before when she was suicidal. He heard she was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. He wondered what this meant. She was challenging and intense, but really beautiful. The nurse entered the room with a small cup and a glass of fresh water. He asked for the biggest dose, hoping to finally sleep. He swallowed the pills. Within an hour, his head felt heavy on his pillow. He began to dream of the river swimming, picnicking days in the sun, when he threw sticks for his dog and drank cold Miller with his wife. Numbers. The girl swallowed 6 shots of tequila and overdosed on 60 lithium capsules. Her adrenaline rush was followed by regret. This could be the end. She vomited and called 911. The 19-year-old boy worked in a group home. He cut his wrist with a dull knife he used to cut cheddar cheese in the group home kitchen. The police were called and rushed him to the hospital. The old woman approached the nurse with a confused shuffle and piercing gaze. Her long gray blonde hair matted. She opened her hands, palms facing up. She held a tissue in her right and in her left a partial denture with 3 molars attached, broken into pieces. This fell out of my vagina, she said. The nurse finished her 13-hour shift and left the unit. She walked through the dark parking lot and sat in her car. The Missoula Club before you, the Brunswick with you. When we met, I tried to tell you I had a long, full life at the Missoula Club before you. My friend and I walked evenings across the bridge, our preferred dress vintage. The cadence of our step in time with her fluent French. She met him there, another genius drunk. Within months, she tried the getaway from him. He used her key to open our apartment, scribbled E.E. Cummings inspired words covering the pink walls. She took him back for half a decade. Their house together, a blue view of Puget Sound. Years later, you walked into the bar drinking Miller and cracking peanuts, eyes aglow with the words of the river and Hugo. Your green sweater, sleeves too short, hair outgrown the last relationship. My maternal instinct ignited. You invited me to your studio by the railroad tracks. Seduced me with your words, maiming me and shifting my life forever. Thank you.
I'm introducing Megan.
Excuse me. Megan McNamer's prize-winning first novel, Children and Lunatics, is about love, grief, and odd obsessions in the murky modern world. The writer Rick Dimaritas says, "You can't lay this book aside unchanged." Her second novel, Home Everywhere, is due out from Black Lawrence Press this November.
I'm going to read a short section that follows the course of a kind of quasi-homeless bag lady who kind of ritualistically walks the streets and looks at all the houses and imagines one she might live in. But on this particular day, she goes a little further than that. One day it was a two-story house with a sun porch. Another time it was a white-painted brick house with a columned front porch and a stone bench. Each time, just looking had the feel of going in. She heard an imaginary bell, a signal, cross the line, careful, proceed, step through. There were high cirrus clouds on this particular day, long wisps against the palest blue, a faint breeze, a hint of smoke still lingering from the forest fires of the summer. It was on the cusp, the sky, the air, the day. It was on a fulcrum, balanced between all that had happened and what was yet to come. After acknowledging her house, two-story stucco shaded with half a fence out front, she walked up the angled sidewalk that led to the front door under an archway flanked by bushes. The porch was made from stones. A small brass dog stood next to a bristled mat. A collar hung around the dog's neck. It said, "Attack Dachshund." The bell made a chiming sound when she pushed it, and a delayed summons emitted from deep within. She listened to the chime and to a plane that droned in the sky far overhead, and to a distant call of a train. She could feel her heart beating. It made her entire body move, slightly, like a tree stirred by a breeze. She pressed the black button again and heard the chime a second later, and she waited. The jet's monotone receded into silence. The train remained, its presence a rhythmic thrum. Brown flowers in a pot moved just perceptibly in the late autumn air. She turned the knob and gently pushed. The door swung open and let her in. The little dog barked frantically, running in circles. She took a step into the dim foyer, and the dog neatly nipped her ankle, then flipped over nearly backward in a rebound of nerves and fury. She stood perfectly still as the gyrating creature barked and ran its circles and performed its near flips. Suddenly, it stopped on a dime and marched stiffly, toenails clicking, over to the end of the tiled hallway, where it flopped its hindquarters and little belly down on the smooth floor. Silence. She waited next to the door. No other sounds came from the house, only the refrigerator in the kitchen whirring into cooling mode, a rustle of ice from the ice maker. She moved her hand from her side a few inches into the air, slowly, experimentally. The dog sat up straight, panting, its wet eyes small dots of perplexed emotion. To her right was the thick green carpet of the living room, like a meadow floor. She pushed the door back into place and moved slowly into the house. She stepped onto the carpet. The dog lay its chin on the hall tiles and watched her and quivered. She took 2 more steps until she was just outside the dog's sight. She stopped and listened. The dog's breathing came in jerky pants. listening too. She inched toward a high-backed chair upholstered in a mauve and green scene of horses, hunters, and hounds. Easing down, she held her own breath. She relaxed into the chair and folded in its arms. A clock on the mantel emitted a small grinding noise and then chimed the half hour. She looked out the window at a weeping birch's slow sachet, a few of its leaves fluttering free, and she looked at the sunlight and shadows on the carpet, moving in patterns like clouds or smoke. A silver packet of matches nestled in a small clear dish next to a white-wicked candle. Her little brother Eddie used to call them people. Blackened matches were bodies, fallen heroes, their lingering ghosts short-lived. Burning matches were kings and soldiers, their heads aflame with gold. Army, alloo, said Eddie, flinging the matches. Magazines on the table were arranged in a fan. Time, Self, Get Simple, U.S. News and World Report. Globe and Cosmos, The New Millennium, a special issue. Whatever you thought, the cover said, think again. The fire was the battle, and it always grew. Thank you. I'm introducing Cheryl Nolfe, and Cheryl was our second poet laureate in Montana. She has 5 poetry collections and a teaching text poetry everywhere, and she is the artistic director of the Missoula Writing Collaborative.
Hi. One thing I love about poetry is its brevity. This first poem is called The Imagined Life, and thank you, Leslie, for framing it and hanging it in your gallery and for inviting me. The Imagined Life. 1. No explosions or gunfire. A quiet peace. The sound of the knot in a silk scarf loosening. 2. Empty drawer with hidden images of soft things. 3. Space traversed by the simple impetus of words, by the atoms of language, as though the imagination created a nerve fiber, something like jute, durable, impermeable, strong enough to build a tent, slick as shark skin. It does not age or weaken. It does not obey natural law. No nuclear force can contain it. 4. So silent this morning, I can hear the cat lapping water. 5. There is no end to the liberties nature takes with our minds. So, this one is called Garment. And I recently accompanied my mother as she passed over. Garment. 1. In this dream, I stand in my mother's bedroom looking out onto the street. Now, her house is empty and I am alone. Even asleep, I recognize a metaphor. 2. All through that last night, I saw the garment of her body slipping away, gliding smoothly onto the sheets. Gravity reduced the lines of worry. Her cool face was almost the color of snow, where pockets are blue inside. Luminous stranger's eyes behind sight. She was changing quicker than the living. Lungs hauling heavy machinery, creaking and groaning like a collapsing bridge. And finally at the end, the bliss. 2. 3. I heard the nurses sing to her. They seemed almost relieved to unplug the measures and help me climb up into the bed with her. It's a good thing you're doing, they whispered, letting her go free. Cupping a small dying bird in my hands. See, if I don't stop now, I won't. Carolyn Patterson. I'm honored to introduce her. She published a story collection, Ballet at the Moose Lodge, a literary anthology, Montana Women Writers, a geography of the heart, 2 children's books on the natural world, as well as travel writing in periodicals such as Sunset and Outside and Via. She is the executive director of the Missoula Writing Collaborative and lives in her 1906 family home with writer Fred Hafley. She has 2 grown children in Missoula who visit when they need to do laundry.
I only hope I can read loud enough.
Yell.
Yeah. This is called Small Town Girl. It's a kind of a prose essay. Crows pepper birch trees, the morning paper thumps the porch. You are in your bed, the whisper of pages turning, turning. Watery light sinks into a valley that was once an inland sea. The distant, incessant bark of a dog interrupts and pervades your dreams, your silences. Streets with names stamped in cement, curbstones, Ronald, Gerald, Evans, misspelled Evans, and the wonder of walking over that mistake year after year to grade school, high school, university. The thunk of suitcases on the stairs when the aunts arrive each summer. The word town derives from the Dutch word zoun that means fence. A town was a village that literally could not afford to build a wall around itself. Instead of fences, you have ants. Ants who arrive each summer and unpack their shorts and sachets, veins like small purple explosions on backs of their knees. The California ant with her beef liver and kelp pills, the Texas ant with her cigarettes, highballs, and stories about your great-grandmother who killed a mountain lion with a heart shot. The Wyoming ant with her stories of birds and blizzards. So many ants, so much advice. You must get an education. You must not go out of the house without lipstick, clean underwear, brushed hair, gloves. Gloves? Make your own clothes, have a nest egg, waste not, want not. Don't marry the first boy who turns your head, but find his stomach and you'll locate his heart. Do not talk to strangers. Walk with a straight carriage, head high. Past the nice man who teaches school and feels up his daughters. Past the red-faced boy who mooches off his bent-backed mother and the dentist who recites the Gettysburg Address as he drills your cavities. Past the abandoned dogs, stray cats, and on down to the railroad tracks where the Milwaukee freight trains rumble by, carrying cattle, wheat, and logs west and east and back again. You must not climb trees, even though from your perch in the mountain ash, you feel this valley belongs to you. From the Clark Fork River to the mountain named for a circus elephant, to the ditch where the hobo was found dead once. You must get straight A's. You must not speak out. You are never smarter than a boy, though we all know who really wears the pants. You must always let the boy, the boyfriend, the brother, the fiancé, the husband be the star. Flatter him. Ask him about himself. Show an interest in his car. What kind of car is it? You stand at the window on a summer night, heady with the perfume of the lilac bush below you, thinking how you would like to lie down on the grass under that violent scent and be kissed, the long, slow meeting of lip on lip. Then your father cuts down the lilac because he is tired of mowing around it. You must not think about touching yourself and that pleasure that washes up from between your legs and engulfs you. You must practice piano, scales, arpeggios, trills, Bach inventions, Mozart sonatas. Look at you go, back straight, feet on the pedals, fingers flying across those ivory keys. You know that if you step on the sidewalk cracks, you'll break your mother's back. Sometimes you want to, but you never say that because you, a lily-white, non-sweating, non-smelling girl, would never have an evil thought like that. No one likes an angry girl. When the paper boy takes you into the playhouse and asks you to show him your thing and you tell him no, then that other boy, the son of your parents' friend, comes into your room during their bridge game and makes you touch him again and again, the door opening and closing. No sound at all. That's better. No sound at all. Then there are the other girls. The girl who teaches
You're
the
letting
class
your voice trail
the
off.
secret I before E except after C. The fat girl, the hippie girl, the girl who smells, the girl who is a little slut, the girl with the jaundiced skin, girly girls with their ruffled ankles, anklets, and taffeta slips like upside-down umbrellas. The girl your aunt tells you about who got pregnant and died of an accidental death while cleaning a firearm. The Flackfeet girl who teaches you to skip Bible school and the delight of swearing as you trump across a plowed field, shit, piss, fuck, screw. The tomboy girls who climb trees and play kickball too loud, too physical, too messy to be real girls, so they have a lot of sex later to make up for this deficiency. The girl called whore, bedded by her father, bedded by her stepfather, who lay her arms down across the table saw and cut off her hands. So one day you step out of the fence. You hop a freight train with a young man you met in the library. As the train rises through the mountains, through the thick forests of Douglas fir and ponderosa pine, you drink beer and eat slices of cheese the man cuts with a hunting knife. At railroad crossings, you stand in the doorway and wave at cars and laugh at the looks of surprise on the drivers' faces. The mountains are dark, thick with snow, and you can feel the rise of the continent, the clattering of wheels on rails, the cool breeze fanning your face as your old life falls away. Something new is in your blood, something thrilling and true, and you and the man make love on your sleeping bag as the train crosses the Continental Divide and plunges down into land scoured of vegetation by the repeated flooding of a glacial lake. At the Columbia River, you hang on the open doorway of the boxcar as the train snakes along the river, watching the house lights ripple in the dark water, the sky spackled with stars, smelling the raw, open smell of the ocean approaching, of your future churning forward. Nothing in your life will equal this. The peering ahead into the darkness, wind whipping your hair, the lights on the river, and this will bear you up in the years ahead, over all those fences, past all those aunts who whisper in your ear, cheek to cheek, do not, do not. Thank you. And now I have the pleasure of introducing Emily Ransdale. Poet Emily Ransdale was one of the first studio occupants of the Brunswick building back in the early 1980s when she was working on her MFA in creative writing at UM. We think we were in the same class. Upon completion of that degree, she and her husband relocated to the Pacific Northwest, where they have lived for 30 years. Emily set poetry aside while she juggled family life and her career as a marketing strategist, but has found her way back to the real work. And her work has been published in Poetry Northwest, Poet Lore, the Cortland Review, and elsewhere. She has been a finalist for the Rattle Poetry Prize, the Prime Number Poetry Prize, and the Janet McCabe Award from Ruminate magazine. Last July, she was featured in American Life and Poetry, a syndicated poetry column published by former U.S. poet laureate Ted Kooser, which we get in the Missoulian, and is funded by the Library of Congress and appears in over 70 newspapers and reaches 1.5 million readers each week. What was the title of that?
Bowling in Heaven.
Bowling in Heaven. So we should all look that up. It was July, right?
I think it was last June or July.
June or July. Yeah. So welcome, Emily Ransdale. So Emily, can you speak loudly?
I can try to.
Okay.
I want you to know that that was my room right there. Some people come back to their alma mater and walk around campus, and I want to go see if the old bar is still in the Wilma and come here. This is a great place. Here's a poem. My mother went to work in a narrow skirt, heels that jackhammered the floor. At night, she shucked them off at the doormat, pulled down the reinforced tops of her hose. Palpable, her relief, her slender feet weightless as wings. After a couple of Jack Daniels, she'd make dinner, an entire meal in one skillet, just like the picture on the box. While we ate, the portable Panasonic flickered on the counter, and when disasters happened, she carried it room to room. Casualties mounted, high school flew open like a broken hinge. Memories scattered like the neighbor boy who never returned. A minister assassinated, then a senator. What did it matter that a short year later we'd walk on the moon? Whole sections of the city were suddenly unsafe. Riderless horses clopped through childhood, coffins shrouded with black and white stars and stripes. And all the TV screens were mothers, pillbox hats and Sunday purses, the heavy anvils of their shoes shuffling slowly behind the rotunda's silken ropes. The last working payphone in the Coast Range. A box of glass and stale air, butts on the floor, or worse. The relief when I opened those accordion doors and stepped in. Back then I was so grateful for quarters, their clink in the slot, the massive black receiver between my shoulder and ear. Pick up, I'm alone out here. I knew the numbers by heart. Who would come if I broke down? Who would simply listen as long as it took? If only night offered such a beacon now, a light by the roadside, a door to close safely behind you while you pray, faith that surely someone will be home. This might be familiar stuff for you here. It's called fire season. You know, in Eastern Oregon, 70,000, I think, acres of wheat just burned. This just happened. Fire season. Days are made entirely of wind. Weeks of ripening wheat fields flattened by the sun's ticking clock. Everyone's worried about fire, and no one goes out past noon but the Mormon boys, making their rounds in trousers and starched white shirts, determined as the dead and in pairs. They try to lure you out with good news. Christ is coming, but you don't answer the door. Why should you? All the news you need comes right to your smartphone, 140 characters at a time. The country's gone mad, says the world. Meanwhile, one strike of lightning could set this whole county afire. We live near the Columbia Gorge, which caught fire last summer. You might remember, it was pretty terrible. What I know about fire: it can jump a river. Embers can travel 20 miles to land on a porch. Night after night, I watch the moon like a copper coin rise above the skyline of lit cedars and death-dry firs, above the smell of dirt and burn. Now, finally, rain. Roses pummeled, chrysanthemums battered limp. Over the thrumming gutters, I hear my thick-voiced Russian neighbors coming in from their car. I don't know what songs they sing to their children or what they would leave for the flames. What past does anyone put in a suitcase and set by the door? Now, the air smells like thunder. Rain will swell the wooden sill if I don't close the window soon. When the yard dries out, there'll be basil and mint to bring in. Summer's finely quenched tomatoes splitting their skins. It's the last one here. Everywhere, a river. I do remember darkness, how it snaked through the alders, their ashen flanks in our high beams the color of stone. That hollow slap as floodwater hit the sides of the car. Was the radio on? Had I been asleep? Sometimes you have to tell a story your entire life to get it right. 22 and terrified, I had married you but barely knew you. And for 40 years, I've told this story wrong. In my memory, you drove right through it. The river already rising on the road behind us, no turning around. But since your illness, I recall things differently. Now that I know it is possible to lose you, I'm finally remembering it right. That night, you threw that car in reverse and gunned it. You found us another way to get home. Thank you. Where is my person there? I'm introducing Eden Solis. Eden is from Fontana, California, a former steel town where her parents worked as nurses at the First Kaiser Permanente Hospital. She has a bachelor's degree in fine arts from the University of Southern California and recently received the Truman Capote Scholarship to attend the University of Montana's Creative Writing Graduate Program. Her collection of stories, Tinder, Tarot, Teacher, chronicles a year of daily encounters with the new age, the desert dating scene, economic hardships, and small everyday trials and triumphs through her role as a payday loan attendant. Her short stories touch intimately on the breadth of lives in the high desert region. Come on, Eden.
Payday loans, how it works. Let's say you have to borrow some money, but you don't have friends or family who are willing or able to lend you that money. An option is to get a payday advance. If you have a regular, proven source of income, like a weekly paycheck or a monthly Social Security payment, you can borrow up to $255 in the state of California. You borrow the amount you need and pay it back on the next payday at a percentage. The payback for $255 is $300. So you pay the lender $45 for letting you borrow that money. Payday loan advances range from state to state and are not available everywhere because some states consider it predatory lending, like Montana does. One problem with payday loans is that if you borrow $255 when you're broke, after an unexpected expense, like an illness or an emergency, or to pay for your regular life expenses like food or covering monthly bills, paying that loan back on your payday puts you back at a deficit, especially if you're on a fixed income like disability or Social Security. Being on a fixed income will always leave you $300 short out of your $600, for example, fixed monthly income. So you only have $300 to last you for the whole month. So then you have to keep reborrowing that $255 and paying the lender $45 just to keep up with the rest of your regular bills and expenses. $45 might not seem like a lot every month, but lots of our customers have been paying that $45 a month for years. Simple math, $45 times 12 months equals $540 a year times 5 years, $2,700. Many payday advance customers have multiple $255 loans with multiple payday advance companies. So every payday they have to go to each payday advance store that they owe money to. They pay them back and then reborrow so they can pay back and reborrow at another payday advance loan store to do the same thing at another payday advance store, all before the day ends. Keep in mind that you are paying a $45 fee at each place that they borrow. There is some relief though. Some payday loans allow you to do a payment plan once a year, and other loan stores have you reborrow less money each time you pay back the loan slowly. It's hard to make a living wage in the desert. We all just barely get by and things happen. Tires need to be replaced, cars break, major health issues like cancer strike out of nowhere. You can depend on unexpected expenses all the time. At that time I had 3 payday loans that I took out while living in the desert, and I was still paying them down. So these are stories of the people I met. Lana. It was Social Security payday and Lana Main was in line to reload. She was in a good mood and jokingly said to me to hurry up because her stump's hurting. She laughed, and when I looked at her, I noticed for the first time that one of her legs had been amputated, and her shorts revealed how it connected to a metal leg brace. I smiled and laughed back as I called her up to my stall. Within a couple weeks, however, Lana's check was returned from the bank. Her loan repayment of $300 did not go through. I called her and she said she would come in to make her payment. That same week, a young woman came in to cash her check. The check was from Lana Main, and it was from another account. The check was cleared by our computer system and I was able to cash it. I let the young girl know the good news and she breathed a happy sigh of relief, sharing that her aunt gave her this check so she could buy a prom dress. She texted someone while smiling and walked out of the store with $100. Lana never came back to make her payment and her loan defaulted. She must have opened an account with a new bank so that the check cashing place couldn't collect her debt from the account we had on file. I secretly felt happy that the check for her niece's dress cleared. Jose. Jose Fernandez, an overweight man around my father's age, walked into the store to reload. He came up to my stall, and as I prepared his contracts, he asked, "Are you married?" "No," I replied. And he asked, "Do you have kids?" And again, I stupidly replied, "No." Then I asked, "Are you married?" He said that he was separated from his wife. And then I asked, "Do you have kids?" He said, "I have 11 kids." I said, "What? Really? Wow." He said, "Yes. My youngest is 3, my oldest is 23 years old." He wanted to know how old I was, and then I said to him, "Can you guess?" He said, 31. I laughed and said, "Hey, you can't ask me that question." Jesus, he totally guessed my age correctly. Then he said, "Do you want to get dinner sometime?" I laughed. Oh God. "I have a boyfriend," I lied. "He lives in LA," I lied again. And Jose said, "Can't friends have dinner?" I laughed. Oh God. "No, he gets jealous. He won't like that," I lied again. At that time, I didn't have a boyfriend in LA or anywhere else, and hadn't for a long time. And Jose replied with, "Well, he doesn't sound like a good boyfriend if he can't trust you." Then I said, trying to make my lie more believable, "No, he's good. He just makes me mad sometimes. Because I always tell him to come down here to the desert more, so I don't always have to drive up there all the time. He's okay though." Then good old Jose says, "Well, if he isn't good to you, just let me know." I said, "Thanks, Jose, I will." Ma'am, people don't trust a 30-year-old unmarried woman who doesn't have kids in the desert. And old men keep asking me out on dates. So I bought a fake wedding ring at Walmart so people would just leave me alone. When I bought the ring, the cashier in the jewelry aisle told me to cover my ring with clear nail polish so that it doesn't mark my finger with a green ring. She said she does that for all her fake jewelry. I thanked her for the advice. She said, "Of course, ma'am." She was maybe in her early 20s and I'm in my early 30s, but that's okay, I'll be ma'am. Here's my last one. Thank you. Mason. Jessica was having Mason sign the larger loan paperwork. Francine, his wife, stepped out because she said we didn't need her there for anything. And while Jessica was handing Mason the paperwork, Mason said, "Yeah, I really didn't want to take out this loan, but I had to after I hired that lawyer." And he looked at me like he wanted me to ask him further about it, and so I did. Mason said, "Yeah, I had to hire a lawyer to get a restraining order against my daughter's husband. He's been beating her." I said, "I'm so sorry to hear that, Mason." He said, "Yeah, well, I wanted to handle it myself, but they wouldn't have looked too kindly at that." I nodded in an acknowledgement, but we stopped talking about it and he finished the paperwork. Jessica gave him his loan money. Mason thanked us and walked out. A few minutes later, I had to go outside to take out the trash. I saw Mason still around smoking a cigarette. I said, "Hey Mason, do you want to use the phone to call your wife?" He said, "No, she'll be around soon. She's picking up my granddaughter, my daughter's baby." He said, "She's the only girl and then I have 2 grandsons. When she was born, we looked at each other and instantly we had a connection. We're best buddies," he said. Well, I said, "That's really nice, Mason. Hey, good luck with everything with the restraining order and your daughter." He said, "Have a Merry Christmas, honey." I said, "Thanks, Mason, you too," as I walked back into the store. I'm going to introduce David E. Thomas. David E. Thomas grew up in the Highline in north central Montana. He graduated from the University of Montana, then found himself on the streets of San Francisco, where he began his literary education. Economic realities drove him to work on railroad gangs, big construction projects like Libby Dam, and other labor-intensive jobs. He has traveled in the United States, Mexico, and Central America. He's published 5 books of poems: Fossil Fuel, Buck's Last Wreck, The Hellgate Wind, Waterworks Hill, and Old Power Company Road. He has poems in the anthologies The Last Best Place and Poems Across the Big Sky 1 and 2, and New Poets of the American West, and has published poems in Romania, Blue Collar Review, Sadia, 6 Brunswick 7 and 8, and many other small magazines. His essay, Gothic Days, appears in the Complete Montana Gothic, edited by Peter Koch, which also features Thomas's earliest published work. Most recently, he has published poems and an interview in Talking River and poems in San Pedro River Review. He lives in Missoula, Montana.
Well, my main association with Brunswick is I was a sidekick of Jay Rummel's for a long time. Jay just had a studio just right down there in the corner. I didn't do anything in there except pass out on the floor. But anyway, I'm going to read you my poem Eddie's Club, which kind of originates from the early days when we were all hanging out together. Eddie's Club. Some nights we were all so stoned you could float a battleship. Other times it was just a couple of guys so hard and mean you knew they carried the cold blue steel on the wrong side of life. As you came in the front door, a candy counter greeted you, but it gathered dust. Most traveled further along the mutant but shining mirror and took their place amid the uproar. Captain Light would be holding forth about dirigibles and light show, while Shellhammer hatched a scheme that threatened to change the world. Big D and Dayshaw squared off for a gunfight that would tune up the night, and of course there'd be Jay Rummel just in from San Francisco to sing the country blues. Now Crumley, we all remember, had an office behind the cooler where he wrote dark tales that shadowed the brightly burning lights. Big-time dealers appeared in fancy cars, bought around for the house and glided away. Vic and Satch would drift in from the res, scouting the return of the buffalo. We weaved and worked each other into a tapestry of memory. Mortar fire and napalm etched our nerves. Some recoiled, some dissented, many died, a lot just watched on TV. But those of us who came to the bar, we fought our war as we saw it. We did not come to knit and sew, especially the girls. Gutowski, Eichwald, Helding, McGeehee walking tables called every bluff. And those Salish gals who loved green onions while us knuckleheads cheered the NFL. There's no end to this saga, not the bare squares on the wall, nor the wax of a used car lot. It meant something, this old saloon, a place where we lived and died and went on to other things. But what of the bartenders, the question remains. Well, they lived and died and went on to other things themselves. There's a whole dimension missing here. The railroad brakemen, the carpenters, old Charlie Hall, the retired redcap, faces Lee and I recognized with his camera, Betty Reynolds with her Charles Lawton face and silver screen heart, called all the young long-haired bearded guys grandpa, while Adam Gardapi stole through the crowd with a hot-eyed opportunity. Jeff Wright, the fish trip packer, observed the melee with osprey widened eyes, and Joe Bonneter rolled his famous cigarette perched on a bar stool like a cutting horse. It was a neighborhood, Gallagher once said, playing guitar and singing songs from the Butte copper mines. Oh, we had Mutt, Jeff, and Captain Phil, and the Dope Patrol. The payphone played a role. Bad checks bounced to death. But always in the morning, the old men got up to play a quiet game of breath against sunset. And when some young drifter hauled in from Mexico, they barely tipped an eye. It was a neighborhood, this Eddie's Club, and it can't end here. I'd like to read one more. This is very short.
If the train comes through, pause.
I hate to give him an inch.
That was awesome.
Drinking with Rummel. I see an old I see a rusty old freighter, veteran of heavy seas, coming in through hard weather, slow and uncertain to its birth, knowing even as it ties up, there's yet another hard trip ahead. So I'm going to introduce Joe Batt. Joe's a figurative ceramic artist and musician, originally from South Dakota. He received a Bachelor of Fine Arts from the University of South Dakota and an MFA from the University of Montana. Currently, he's a full-time art faculty at South Puget Sound Community College in Olympia, Washington. He's also taught at the Evergreen State College in the summer program, Lower Columbia College, California State University, the University of Montana, and Olympic College. He's been an artist in residence at the Northern Clay Center in Minneapolis, Minnesota, at the Watershed Center for the Ceramic Arts in Newcastle, Maine, and Red Lodge Clay Center in Red Lodge, Montana. His work has been described as quirky, friendly, mysterious, and sentimental. Recent works focus mostly on 3D and 2D renderings of children navigating the digital age. Joe's ceramics have been exhibited widely in galleries and museums around the country, including Contemporary Crafts Gallery in Portland, Oregon, the Holker Museum in Helena, Art Space Lima in Lima, Ohio, Palm Gallery in Seattle, Washington, Northern Clay Center in Minneapolis, FOVA Gallery at Texas Tech in Lubbock, Santa Fe Clay in Santa Fe, New Mexico, Lorinda Knight Gallery in Spokane, Washington, Two Vaults in Tacoma, Washington, and the Arts Center at Washington Gallery at Washington State University, Tri-Cities in Pittsburgh, Washington. So, big hand for Joe Batt.
Hi everybody, I'm Joe. I'm from Olympia, Washington. I'll tell you a little bit about my experience with the Brunswick here, and then I think there's one more after me. But I'll make it quick. I was in grad school here in ceramics at the university in the early 90s. I had a couple of friends, David Regan and Paul Guillemette, who had studios up here. So on those cold nights, I lived down this way, so I would walk or ride bike or drive and stop and see them on my way home. And it was a really great experience for me as a student to see working artists in their studios, figuring out how to do these things that aren't always easy to do at home. And so after I graduated, I got a teaching job for a year, and then I came back and I got a studio here. And that was really cool. I got a chance to work on the Montana Artist Caravan project with artists from Bozeman, Missoula, Great Falls, including Steve Gluckert, LVSM2, Bev Gluckert, Catherine Mallory, Bobby Tilden, a bunch of us, 14 of us. We went to 17 places around the state with our artwork. But I created that work here, which was really awesome for me to have a chance to do that. So later I got a teaching job out in Olympia, Washington, but I took a sabbatical to come out here, and I wanted to just draw, and it turned out that this was a great space because of the tall walls, and Leslie allowed me to draw right on the walls. And I've been doing drawings of my students holding their cell phones, because I've noticed every day after class they're just standing around like that. And this is getting to be a few years ago. So I wanted to do a bunch of work about this, and my drawings at that point had become these life-size cutouts that I just hung on the wall. And I wanted to do some more sculptural versions of that. So it was great that Leslie trusted me to take over the space for a month. Since then, I've taken that show. It's called In the Cloud. In case you ever want to see it, it's called Joe Batt In the Cloud on YouTube, if you want to see it on YouTube. There's a venue in Tacoma where it was filmed. But it's evolved and it's been exhibited about 10 times since then. I guess that's going to be about 5 or 6 years ago that I did that. And so now the piece has digital work in it. It has 2 and 3D and ceramics. And it's really just about surviving the paradigm that we're in now of where I guess Marshall McLuhan's kind of sort of prophecy, the medium is the message, that's coming somewhat true. I think what he said was it's not what the media is saying. It's sort of like what we say through our media is like the handwriting on a nuclear weapon. It's sort of insignificant. The media and the medium are exploding in our lives in a really interesting and daunting way. So my show is about that, and when I do it, I talk to students or people about that, and it's been really enlightening for me. Some of it's a little depressing, but usually I come away with a little bit of hope, thanks to young people who come in and talk to me about the work. I'll just tell you real quickly, some of what I cover in the work is, when I give my talk on the show, is how screen time and digital technology contribute to or exacerbate mood disorders and addiction. Also that we create a lot of waste from it, including 50,000 tons a year that just go to India alone. And a bunch of other things which I can share with you later. I won't talk too much more. There is an interesting group that uses technology in a positive or a creative way. And that's what I tell my students, be creative with it. Don't just be a consumer of it, because it's insidiously capable of making us spend money in all kinds of different ways. So I challenge myself and other artists to try to, don't just be crash test dummies for technology. After I left here, I began teaching. I knew that Ed Keenholz had given a show here. And I was at the Tacoma Art Museum with my students from a small community college. And there was a piece there. It looked kind of like a Keenholz piece. It had tape on it and pencil marks and some found stuff. I took my class up in the collection. I said, look at this wall piece. And the students said, well, those are the light switches for the museum. Critical moment in my career. I had to say just the right thing. So I said, let's go down to eat down here, down this way, at this restaurant right down here. It's gone pretty well since then. But I just want to say thanks for the chance to chat with you a little bit. I'd be happy to share with you about In the Cloud, which is the exhibit. I was fortunate enough to start here, have been doing since. And also I just want to thank Leslie and Max for all they've done here for the community. It's not the same without something like this going on in a small town. And so the contribution is significant. As we all know, we've seen the place grow, and it meant a lot to me. And I continue to get chances to come back here, and I always stop in to see what's going on. And I admire Leslie a lot, the detail in your work, how hard you work on your work every day. And so that's inspiring as well. I'll stop talking. Thank you very much. I think someone's going to introduce somebody now.
Yeah. Thank you, Jeff. So the order now is I'm going to introduce Amy Ratto, who had a studio down here. She went through the MFA program at the university, and she has a book of poetry and a novel. Where are you? Oh yeah, is that right? A book of poetry and a novel, and she can tell you a little bit about that. She's going to read, and then, so just to give you the order, she's going to read, and then I'm going to have people kind of rotate in this direction because we have a performance piece that will take place in real time, but it'll be towards the street. And then following that, if people are not exhausted, I will tell you a very short story about one of the pieces of art in the gallery. Then we'll have a pause, and we'll have wine and cheese and crackers for people, and Joe and Steve Flukert will play some music. It'll be more informal. And you will have an opportunity, if you would like to, we will have a memory booth operating over here, where especially if you have spoken tonight, I really encourage you to give a 3 or 4 oral description of your experience here, or what was important to you about the Missoula art scene, or if you attended openings here, it doesn't matter. Anything that you would like to say. The Historical Museum at Fort Missoula is trying to collect that, but I'd like Amy to speak for now. Okay?
Thank you for the introduction. I'm Amy Ratto Parks. I had a studio here a couple of years. My kids were really small. This was a super priceless time to have a studio here because I had kids that were like newborn and kind of like maybe 1 to 3 in that time, and I lived just past the Scott Street Bridge and could retreat here away from my family, and it was really important. So the couple of poems I'm going to read, I'm just going to read 3. I was working on during that time, so my kids are now teenagers, so it's been a while. But I was very grateful for this place, and I had a studio with my best friend who runs Open Country Press that you read your piece out of, and that was in her newest anthology. So a lot of pieces coming together. So this first poem is called Song for Pink Bloom in Passerine. This is burning season. A waxwing flies over hibiscus and peony, over a sludge pit, cow shit, latrine, over barbed wire and slash pile. You should ignite the green wreckage, the overgrown promise, the seed head, the cabbage flowers. Burn it now before the season comes on, before you fall asleep to dreams of lightning flash fires. Whip finish for the pasture that always runs toward some golden, tragic sanctuary. Even in sleep, you throw your arms out before you. In defense or protection, it looks the same. All that spring green gone brown and released to the blaze, to black, black, black. What can you burn now to stave off the sudden brush fire? Birdsong rises up from the sage field and something hovers far above, silent before the buckling, sharp descent, the melancholy rapture. Swallow, martin, a tight meal of driftwood bones and bright feathers. The lungs' last breath, the long-held bone air releases to the salvia bloom, settles in the lupin. The rest will ashen, so hold it close. This is bohemian light, sweet passerine. With crow heart, with raven eye, enter the bright wreckage. Steal away the small lockets and thin bowstrings of pleasure. Give me your hand. This poem is called Song of Borrowed Places, and it's about a cabin in the Cabinet Mountains up near Libby that we went and spent time there with an artist who has her working here tonight, so I thought I'd read it. It's called The Song of Borrowed Places because really we were borrowing her cabin. The Cabinet Mountains shadow the hoodoos, which shadow the lake and the beach and us standing in the grass, and the kids are naked from the waist, then naked in the frosted water. Their sandy skins turned pink from cold, and the lake, naked between trees, flushes between reeds and the hidden fish below. of ones I've read. I like other people's better. But it's a happy poem, which is hard. It's called Song for the Buoyant Thistle Body. In the bright dome of the forest, the path ascends slowly out of the morning fog. Somewhere nearby, there are houses with newspapers on the stoop and shapely topiary gardens in the yard. But here the canopy's yellow gold burns wild. The red brush lions against your shins, and you want to run ahead because you sense that suddenly everything has been returned from the edge of memory and flickers in the bright shadow like red fruit behind red leaves. This is not riddle or cone. You know this in your bones, in your drowsy child's mind. If the body is made to crater under life's dark weight, then surely it is made for this day, swollen with the salts of joy. The heart's crowded aviary crashes its fine cage. The skin of each pore a buzzing apiary lifts. Walk forward and wait to be gathered back under the warm wing of a lost familiar. The sky cracks ever open, and in this moment you know there is always more to you than you. The buoyant thistle body blooms. Hold fast, wash in the day's wide basin of happiness.
So I'm going to ask for consensus. Do you want to hear a 3 or 4 minute story about Jay Rummel?
Yes.
Okay, I'll keep it short, okay? So in 1977, I was a young artist. I was a single mother. And my daughter and I had a studio in the Belmont Hotel, which is on Higgins. I don't know whether it's called anymore, but it's down there. And it was there was a very old hotel. I was on the top floor. Jay Rummel had a studio across the hallway from me. The hallway was very wide. The hallway was like 8 feet wide. And my studio was small, so I would put my daughter in the hallway outside of my room. She had a little table, she had art supplies, and I would work in my room, and it was like, look, I'm working, you work too. And so she was 3 years old, and she was very good at doing stuff like that, and she was charming. And Jay had the studio directly across from our room, and so just by the fact that we were in proximity, he became aware of her and became friendly with her. And at the same time, there was a restaurant in the downstairs of that building that served tea and food, and I would want to go down and get a cup of tea, and I didn't want to have to haul her down 3 flights of stairs. So I got to the point where on several occasions I asked him if I could leave her with him for 10 minutes while I went down to get the tea and came back up. And I would probably be arrested by child services at this point if they knew the conditions that prevailed in his room, which his room was very large. It was full of a bunch of men kind of looking like him, wearing black hats and running around and doing things like, I don't know what they were doing, but they were all sort of bad boys. And I would come back and find Indigo propped up in a very oversized, beat-up chair reading a comic book. And he became really fond of her. And so flash forward, when she was turning 21, he had a studio in this corner. So we had been around each other for like 15 years by that point, because he had moved into the downstairs and my studio was upstairs. And so I approached him. She was in college, and I said, Jay, Indigo, who you were fond of, you know, her 21st birthday's coming up, and I'm going to commission you, if you're willing to, I said, I'd like to commission you to do a little plate for her. You know, it'll be special for her because she remembers you, and you're very talented. And I said, it just you know, like 5 inches, 6 inches. And I told him, I said, I have $500, and I'll pay you $500, and her birthday's in 4 months. Oh, okay, I'll do it. So what turned out to be a 4-month prelude turned into a 1.5 years of me going down almost once a week and going, oh, you know, her birthday is coming up. Oh, okay. You know, her birthday went by, but she's going to be home in June for the summer vacation. Oh, okay. Jay, you know, I was coming up with holidays. That's kind of an excuse. And in the meantime, what I realized is that when he agreed to do the commission, which he wanted to do, that I didn't understand what it meant to him. And so instead of a plate that was 5 inches wide, it is in the room there, and you'll see it's like 15 to 17 inches wide. It was getting bigger and bigger. And when I realized that, I went down and I said, you know, Jay, I only have the $500. I really, and he said, I don't care. I can't work small. That, you know, it's like, that's ridiculous. And it's like, okay, well, as long as you're aware of that. So it became a much more ambitious project. And I realized belatedly that it was probably the last significant piece of art that he did before he died. And he did work on it a year and a half. And over that time, it got to the point where he kind of expected me to come down and ask, okay, I'm working on it, what's going on? He was experimenting on it. And finally, I think at the Christmas before she got it, she was home and he had done the underglaze. He had not glazed it, but I got a really nice photograph of the two of them outside here on the sidewalk, him holding the plate with her beside him. So that's really important to me. But anyway, sometime after that, he went ahead and glazed it, and we're very fortunate that it is in the show. She gave permission for me to show it. And what's really sweet is he inscribed her name on it, and then he wrote, he wrote, "The higher you fly, the sweeter the breeze." And I think that was kind of his motto. It's very charming. So if you have a chance, you ought to go in and look at it before the evening's over. But if you we're going to take a little intermission. I'm going to set up some food, and Joe and Steve are going to. You want to maybe be in this, or maybe here, so I can see it out. Okay. So thank you for being patient. We appreciate you being here. And if you wait a few minutes, there'll be a little bit of refreshment. Thank you.